Thank you so much for joining us. Today is Wednesday. Time flies quickly when you're having fun. Theme of the week at Hack Mankind, as we've been going through, is choices. And on that subject, I think there's probably no better area than choices than legal. It kind of boils down to who was right and who was wrong, which is perhaps the mother of all choices. I've got today with me, we've got Michael and Sarah Goldenthal. Michael's going to take over from here, looking very dapper. So Mike, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Peter. And always I appreciate this platform and what you've created here. But Michael Smikun, folks, your relentless guardian here to help you shape and influence results. And as Peter just indicated, we have the wonderful Sarah Goldenthal with us. Family law, matrimonial attorney extraordinaire, mother, wife, all of those amazing fixins. So somehow she finds a way to balance all of the insanity of family law with her own family. So things have been very fun in that regard. Sarah, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, all things considered. Thanks for having me today.
So, all things being considered, what do you mean by that? That's a weird statement.
Well, so things are a little out of the ordinary right now. I don't know if you've noticed. But we are figuring out this new normal. Working pretty much completely remotely from my 2-bedroom apartment in New York City with my 18-month-old and my husband, who also works full time, and no childcare. And yeah, it's been fun.
So walk us through a little bit about what it is that you do. So we talk about family law, matrimonial, and things of that issue. Like, what does the day-to-day look like for you?
My practice covers, family law and matrimonial law. So everything that's related to divorce, from, issues that are fairly obvious that maybe most people would know about, relating to custody, parenting time, decisions relating to children that people have in common, support obligations, whether it's support on behalf of children or support to a former spouse, and division of assets. But beyond that, we also do, domestic violence work. We do, work relating to, custody and support for parents who have children in common who maybe were never married, and the issues that arise, relating to those scenarios. So that kind of is a really broad stroke of describing what I do, but that's more or less what it covers.
So presently, right, because I am familiar with everything that's going on in the universe right now, I'm not, I'm certainly very plugged into it. That has created quite an interesting situation for families, right? I think you yourself pointed out one of them, right? No childcare, schools closed, parents working full time, 2 of them, right? So I guess, what has been your experience in the last, 6 weeks now that New York is on the New York pause? The governors and the county executives have issued the stay-at-home or work-from-home orders and things of that nature. What has been your experience with people and their potential family issues? Like, what have you been seeing? What has been the trends that you've seen?
So, in my personal observations with my specific clients, the first issues that came to light were really relating to parenting time exchanges, and how do we, transfer children back and forth between 2 households when we have these stay-at-home orders. Sometimes that means crossing state lines, sometimes that means significant travel, sometimes that means children are going from a household where maybe a grandparent or somebody who is, possibly more compromised than somebody else for health reasons, is now being sent to the other household where somebody's still working or is not, taking their stay-at-home directive seriously, and the concerns that are kind of related with that back and forth and exposure to the virus. That was those are the first issues that I was seeing in my practice when this all started. But certainly since then, there's been other issues. Unfortunately, there's been an uptick in domestic violence cases because, as you may imagine, when people are stuck in the same household, it can be tensions can rise, and people who maybe were not always behaving their best to begin with are things are escalating, and that's been very difficult for those individuals. And then also now, what we're starting to see more of now, and I think what we're anticipating to see more of are the sort of financial consequences among, you know, our client base of what's happening. So, but yeah, it's been a tough journey so far, and unfortunately, we're trying to figure out creative ways to handle and to advise our clients, because the courts, although they are operational in both New York and New Jersey, they're functioning on a more limited basis. So trying to think outside the box as to how to help people come to the resolution, even if it's a temporary one, to get through this time.
Yeah, I mean, look, whoa, right? You just shared a whole lot. And like those aren't your white collar, you know, worker issues that you see in commercial disputes and courts being shut down. Like these are like real emotional, hard-hitting challenges that parents and children are now having to go through. And even the three things that you just shared are like enormous, right? That's like, you know, if you're divorced or you have a legal separation and you live in two different households and you have shared custody with your children, you know, parent number one has been staying at home, has been really responsible in terms of, making sure that they're quarantining or keeping away the children from exposure. And then you have parent number two who is being, you know, not appropriate or doing things and putting themselves at risk. And because this disease is asymptomatic, right? Can you imagine being a parent and going, hey, look, I know you're allowed to have the kid this week, but you've been going out, you've been doing things. I don't want to expose my child to that. And so I know we have a court order. I'm not complying. Sue me, right? Or something along those lines. Have you been seeing that kind of stuff as well, like popping up?
Yes, those were the initial issues that I was seeing, from the outset. And it's a, we are in uncharted waters here, and at least from the very beginning, it was even more difficult at that point to try to get before a judge. But I have, at this point, been able to get some insight on how the courts are sort of viewing, this sort of conduct by parents. Every case is different. Every case has its own facts. But what I am seeing is that generally the judges are saying, parenting time is an essential function. If you have an order that says that your kid has to be produced, that kid has to be produced. Of course, there are exceptions to that. And, if there are, I've had situations where my client has gotten sick and the child had to be sent to the other parent who was not the primary custodial parent for a period of time until my client, thankfully recovered. And there was some back and forth about that issue. And then there's also the issue of, well, my client thinks, or the other side thinks that, one party is not being responsible, but maybe can't prove it. So it's sort of figuring out what's really going to be what's in the best interest of the child at hand. And also, making sure that we're protecting everybody, but not using this as an opportunity to try to get a leg up in litigation.
Amazing. And so I think you've stumbled into this beautiful area where once you're at home and you're not really seeing day-to-day function operating normally, and that everything is closed, right? Banks are closing, courts are closed and things of that nature. And there's this feeling of, is our justice system still here for us? Is it still operational? Is it still working for us? What has been your experience with, first, the ability to get the court's attention, two, the timeliness, right, or the responsiveness of the justice system, and three, has it been more like it was before, or is it different now?
I will say you know, in my specific experience, I have not had to file or answer an emergent application yet, which would be really the way to get the attention of the court immediately. So I can't really speak to that, but the cases, many of the cases that I have had court appearances via telephone at this point, which would normally have been in person. I do think that there is something missing when you take the personal appearance out of particularly this kind of emotional, very sensitive type of stuff that we do. But a lot of my cases have also been sort of pushed because I think the court is trying to prioritize, you know, the very emergent, very essential issues first. You know, many of, you know, like I said, domestic violence has kind of been put on the forefront, you know, rightfully so. Issues where there's an imminent threat of harm to a child or a party in a case, you know, that needs to come usually before a financial issue. So I am seeing a lot of, you know, my cases kind of getting pushed too. So it is definitely not functioning in the way that it normally would. And there's going to be a backlog because of this. So, you know, we're trying to, again, think outside the box. What can we do if it's possible in a particular case to help our clients, and even, you know, the other parties if possible, figure out a resolution outside of using, you know, the court system. If it's possible. I mean, we have mediators in our department. We use mediators throughout New York and New Jersey. Bergen County specifically has some really terrific mediators. They can, you know, hear cases via video conference and, you know, telephone conference if need be. I prefer video, I think, in those cases, to try to figure out if we can, you know, help people come to resolutions of their issues because of the delay and because of maybe not being able to get before a judge as quickly as we normally would.
Yeah. So is it fair to say then the justice system is here? If you need it, it will be ready to deal with your issue. If you just want it, you're going to have to wait, right? It's going to be longer than what you expected. Is that fair?
I think that's very fair. Yep.
Yeah. And so, you know, you are kind of at the forefront of a lot of the issues that families are dealing with here. And what it feels like, at least from my perspective, is, and I think Peter had shared this before, that the pandemic didn't really change much that wasn't already happening. Meaning, it was kerosene and oxygen on a flame making the trend move faster. It didn't really change things. So like people at home who had challenges, right? And everybody has challenges. Like even the best parents who portray themselves on Facebook as the greatest, you know, individuals that ever walked the earth have had those moments with their children, right? And I think that all parents have kind of a mutual understanding for one another. It's like, oh, today was a really rough day. We're like, yeah, we know. Nobody really talks about what that actually means, but we all kind of understand. But it really accelerates many of the challenges and trends that have already been, you know, kind of there. So, you know, I think when you started out, you said, like, people who already had some challenges, there's, you know, we're starting to see more of that. But it's not everybody, right? You're locked inside. I have my 3-year-old, and I was on a conference call just now. I don't get dressed up for fun, right? I had my own hearing today, so the justice system is here. But I had my own hearing today, and my 3-year-old like wanted to barge into my office. Like, she just did not take no for an answer, and all she wanted was one of my cool hats right back there. And I'm like, Ava, you can't come in here. I'm like on a conference with the court. And so, yeah, you know, people get frustrated and things of that nature. But it's an acceleration. It doesn't really create new trends. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with that observation.
Awesome. So
I think, Mike, if I can, and apologies to everybody at home. One of the problems with Zoom as a panelist is you don't have the raise hand button, so you have to talk over each other, which is really awkward. I think I agree with you, and I agree with my own sentence, obviously, that these challenges already existed. The problem I think that we have is we're all realizing how complacent we were. And instead of focusing on our growth, let's take something, as you said, like parenting tactics, right? How to parent your children. We were all very forgiving with ourselves, and you should be forgiving of yourself no matter what the occasion, but we didn't seek growth. We didn't seek to become better parents, actively seek to become better parents. So, I was speaking to a business the other day, because that's my area of domain, and it was an alternative health provider, and then I can't see anyone. I can't do any business. I can't do anything. I'm like, okay, I assume you've called every client you've had for the last 5 years then. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you're sitting at home. Just start calling your clients and just ask them how they are. He's like, why do I do that? I'm like, because it's called having a relationship with your client. And when we do, we're not going to return back to normal. That's gone. But when we come back out the other side of this, if you've done what I've said, your order book is going to be more full than it would ever have been, because you'll have developed those relationships. And I think my concern is systems, whether it's banking, legal, real estate, always have the ability to have some slack, like 3, 4, 5% the system can cope with. But the statistic coming out of the International Labour Organization today says the estimate is currently that 2 billion people worldwide are surviving on 60% of what they were 3 months ago, and that 1.5 billion people could be displaced from their livelihood for up to 5 years. They are big numbers. And the only reason I was bringing that up, when Sarah said, yes, we're starting to see a backlog, I've got 2 hallucinations in my head. One of them is that legal cases that maybe were frivolous won't be brought to the fore anymore, because people go, you know what, I'm just not going to bother. Or my second one is, well, what happens to that backlog then? Because we're not just talking about when we come out of this, there's going to be a lag, isn't there?
I mean, I think so. I'm seeing, I had cases that were supposed to be heard in March. They've been pushed to maybe July or August, which is going to push up. And that those dates were not, I don't foresee them being dates that the case would be resolving on, the case would be resolved at that point. So it's pushing everything back months. And maybe it'll be a deterrent for people, from filing frivolous applications with the court. I don't know. I mean, but the court, ultimately, we're going to see that the courts are going to be inundated, because people are still going to need, help, legal assistance and judicial intervention when it comes to divorce, when it comes to their children, when it comes to support. So they're not going to stop filing for those reasons. So they're going to continue to file. I don't know. I mean, there's going to be this backlog. I think the courts are going to be inundated. It's just going to probably end up taking longer to get a resolution on issues. And it's going to be a problem, particularly in a case where people should not be living in the same house anymore. For various reasons, right? And that could be really problematic for those individuals for many reasons, and their children, if there are children involved. So it's concerning.
Okay, so a question for both of you, and then I'm going to hand it back to Michael. I know of Carnegie Law personally, and I have a huge amount of respect for what you guys do. And it's such a more, I hate this word because it's so overused, but such a more holistic approach than we're your lawyers, we'll file this, we'll do this. To both of you, and I guess maybe Mike first, how's Carnegie responding to that extra pressure then? Because if you're saying somebody that was expecting to get heard in March is now going to get heard in August, it's not an unrealistic thing for me to say that person's going to be under huge amounts of pressure that's building every day and getting worse. Is there now either an onus or an opportunity, depending on how you want to look at it, for Carnegie to I'm not saying to have a therapy role or a counseling role, but I'm sure your clients are a lot more scared and nervous, and they're probably therefore asking you questions that normally you might not get as a lawyer. You might normally be like, yeah, I'm on it, I'm done it, gone and boom. And now they're saying, well, how am I going to cope? How am I going to survive? I'm sure you're getting a lot more, as I said, holistic troubles. Is that something that you're actively addressing, etc.? Michael?
Yeah, look, I'll address it first, and I'd love to open it up to Sarah. So look, I will share a little bit about me, but let me start with Sarah. I've sat in on meetings before, and none of the things that you just mentioned are new to us, right? We have always sharpened our listening, right? And trained from a place of love and caring for our clients to really hear cries for help, right? Cries for help manifest themselves in different ways, right? So you may end up with a client who calls you up yelling, right? And angry and furious, but it's not because they're actually angry. It's because they have uncertainty and they don't know how to deal with that uncertainty. And so what you really do is you sharpen your listening for those cries for help and try to determine and question and work through whatever that challenge is. And so from my perspective individually, and I think Sarah is very much like this as well, there's nothing new about what's been happening. It's a different flavor, but clients have always come to us when they're at their most uncertain points in their lives. And so, the depth of the uncertainty and the type or cause of the uncertainty may have changed, but it's all still uncertainty, right? Sometimes it's other things, but right now it seems that the issue du jour seems to be uncertainty. And so we've always done a tremendous job of, and prided ourselves on really listening to those cries for help and giving the certainty where necessary. From my own experience, and I'm going to turn this over to Sarah because I don't want to talk too much because Sarah's tremendous and I want to give her space on this issue. From my own perspective, my clients have actually been so understanding of the delays and things of that nature. And in fact, what I've come to see is everybody now has new challenge, and they've really risen to that challenge and have made certain decisions. Some people are going to be the outliers on these issues and they're going to deal with stress and uncertainty in different ways. But I, in my own perspective with my own clients, have seen just this really just beautiful effort to really embrace the fact that we don't really know a lot of things and things have changed, and really rolled with the punches. But for me, many of the challenges that I face, you may or may not know, is we're talking about commercial challenges, right? We're talking about shareholder disputes. We're talking about, innovation law, the foundations of businesses, the creation of businesses, the optimization of business strategies. And I think that in that regard, entrepreneurs are very unique in that they are always ready for some level of uncertainty. I really want Sarah to respond to this because I think, much more deeper to the core are the family issues, right? And even the people who claim they don't care about family, or they've never really wanted a family and now they have children, and there's all those types of challenges. I feel like when you're deep down in that emotional level, it's so much more challenging to deal with. So Sarah, how have you made do with the challenge that Peter's talking about?
So just to sort of echo, what you were saying, Michael, is that, this dealing with these sort of emotional responses and sort of wearing this other hat outside of the legal hat for the benefit of my clients is not something that's new for me or the other, family law practitioners in our firm. We are really compassionate. We really do try to aid our clients through this, the issues that we're facing, even outside of the pandemic, are often very wrought with emotional distress. And we're dealing with people who are, some of them going through the worst times in their life. So outside of the pandemic. So this is not new. I guess what I can say is that I'm seeing kind of a variety of responses to the delay or the anticipated delay among my clients. I've seen some really beautiful responses, I have to say. I have, again, I'm trying to be creative and help, my clients obviously obtain the best results possible, but also I'm seeing parents who have not been able to historically work together, and for the benefit of their child or children. And I'm seeing people come up with, it's a real push for people to try to come to their own settlements instead of having some stranger in a black robe make that decision for them. Obviously, that's not a possibility in all cases, but when it is a possibility and it's something that is ultimately going to, get them out of this uncertain time, and it's something that they can walk away from and feel proud of, and can ultimately walk away feeling like they've come to a decent compromise, then and it's fair, then I think it's a good result. There are clients that are not happy about the delay, but unfortunately this is the reality of our situation, and we try to be as supportive emotionally as possible. This is our reality. I mean, I don't think anybody is really happy about our current circumstances, but we have to do our best to get through it and think outside the box to be able to move forward.
Sarah, can I ask you a question? And this is, to me, and I could be completely mistaken about this, but this is kind of the 800-pound gorilla in the room with what Peter just shared. Mm-hmm. When we're going to talk about post-divorce, right? The dissolution decree, settlements, and things of that nature, where there's obligations to pay child support by one of the spouses, or obligation to pay spousal maintenance by one of the spouses, people are losing their jobs, right? They're becoming unemployed. Their number of hours are being decreased. Their salaries are being cut and things of that nature. And nobody really wants to talk about this, but that obviously impacts their obligations to the non-working spouse or the underemployed spouse, in the situation with spousal support or child support payments. How is that handled, right? At least from a top line perspective, in with regard to the situations that you've encountered? So
it's a tough one, right? And it's an excellent question that really requires a very long answer. We actually we have an article that I believe is going to be published in the New Jersey Law Journal on this issue specifically of how New Jersey is going to be, or how we anticipate New Jersey is going to be addressing these issues relating to support modifications due to the pandemic or as a result of the pandemic. So just sort of generally speaking, outside of our, the current financial crisis, in general, if there is an obligation that is set forth in an order or some sort of agreement, the payor does have the opportunity to try to seek a modification of that obligation upon a showing of what we call in our world a substantial change in circumstances. That being said, until the court orders that there is a change to that obligation, that person is still obliged to make their support payments. So just because you were unfortunately laid off, or you were furloughed, or you received a salary cut, doesn't mean that you can now unilaterally stop paying your support obligations. I mean, the idea being that there are children that still need to eat. But you do have the option of filing an application. Now, there are factors that the court considers when making that determination. Oftentimes there's a hearing. And I would say, like, traditionally, the courts will want to basically see that you're doing everything that you can to sort of mitigate your circumstances, meaning that if you were laid off historically, you would go and try to find, other employment that was commensurate with what you were doing before. But we're now in this like very uncharted territory, but where there's, businesses are closing left and right, and they may not reopen. And it's a terrible job market out there. And so there are different deadlines and rules for applying for a modification, whether it's child support or alimony. For child support, if you have experienced some sort of income reduction because of a job loss or salary reduction or something like that, your relief is not going to be retroactive beyond whatever date you filed your application. So you should certainly talk to a lawyer as soon as possible and probably file your application sooner rather than later and not wait on it, because your relief will only be retroactive to the date of filing. In terms of like alimony, if you are a W-2 earner, you generally you would need to really wait at least 90 days before filing an application. So you can see that there's different rules for whatever sort of modification you're looking for. The court's going to look at different things. And we're hoping that the court is going to, view the current circumstances with being in an equitable manner, and maybe relax, the rules of mitigating circumstances, given what's going on with the terrible job market and the fact that there's 26 million people who have now applied at least for unemployment, and everything else that's going on. So
I like my unique role on this call of changing smart words into 6th grade words. Right? So I love it, because I love being on a call with people smarter than me. It's fantastic. So I'm going to try and reword that, and if I get it wrong, can you say no, you didn't understand? Number 1, if you made an agreement or the court told you to do something, unless that's undone, it stands. Yes. Number 2, if you were earning X and you're now earning Y, talk to a lawyer really quickly, because if you want to modify that first agreement we just spoke about, it ain't that simple, but do it sooner rather than later, and a lawyer can guide you through that, such as Sarah. How does that sound?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So if you were told to do it, you still got to do it until it's undone. And the nuance of that is all still being worked out. And this is one where I go, this is Lawyerville.
I will add what that nuance means. Peter, I will add something to that. I'm sure Sarah's going to agree with me that when we do begin to approach some sense of normalcy, remember that judges are human beings, right? And they are emotional. As much as they like to tell you that they are unbiased, impartial, and unemotional, that is frankly not true. And so you're going to end up with people who are very understanding of real challenges. And so if you've lost your job and you are making requests for modification of your child support payments or spousal support or spousal maintenance, and these are real challenges that you have, that doesn't make you a bad person, right? It makes you a person who is mindful of yourself as well as others. But I will caution you this: if you try to use this situation to try to get an advantage and try to limit your spousal maintenance or your child support payments, those same judges who are very understanding because they are human beings and emotional will throw the gosh darn book at you, and they can, Sarah, is this fair? Increase your child support payments potentially, especially when we're dealing with one side saying this is how much the person's making and the other side saying this is how much the person's making. The judge can go, you feel really sketchy and non-credible to me, and I feel like you're trying to take advantage. I'm going to go ahead and side with this person in terms of their valuation, because I think there's definitely substantial evidence of that. So I think what Sarah's saying, what Peter is beautifully simplifying, and what I'm just kind of sprinkling on top is, do not use this as an opportunity to cheat the system, right? Because many judges are very scholarly and they know when someone's gaming them. So if you do it legitimately, you should, right? But if you game the system, you may get hurt in the process. So I just want to make sure that's clear. Sarah, what's your feelings about that with judges?
Beautifully said, Michael. And what I will say is, even, before this whole crisis occurred, I would have somebody who would come in and say, I need to modify, or lower my support obligation because I just got laid off yesterday. I would say, that's a really tough application. We can talk about what you need to do to prepare for that, but do not expect that we're going in next week and you're going to get that modification. Again, every case is different, every circumstance is different, and I don't want to get into all the nitty gritty, but it's not it's not an easy win under normal circumstances. I don't expect it's going to necessarily be an easy win now. I do hope that the courts are going to be reasonable and sensitive to these specific circumstances, but absolutely the judges are going to be paying attention to opportunistic behavior, and they don't like it.
Yeah.
And that goes across the board. That's for financial, applications, and that's also for, kind of what I mentioned earlier about parenting time. I mean, there is a terrific judge in New York who wrote this great article about, we're paying attention. And if you are going to use this opportunity to play games about parenting time, that could really hurt you down the road in a custody battle. So be warned. So I feel like that also sort of follows the sentiment that you were just relaying.
I think, to me, what you're both saying is something that actually kind of fills me full of a bit of hope, which is great news, because commercial law, and again, Michael, we've discussed this, and we have different, first of all, we work in different legal systems, right? I'm from the UK and the Euro goes in the US, but as a general rule, commercial law can have a little bit of shenanigans in it. It can have, no, that word meant that, no, that word meant that. The difference between signed as a deed or signed as agreement opens up this whole new library of responsibilities, and certainly in the UK. But what you're both saying in this area is what I've always felt should be the case, which is what you're saying is the law is designed to be a system that represents morality. Right. So it's designed to protect people and help people that are trying their best, however that manifests. And it's designed to punish people that are trying to take advantage of other people, which is kind of what you both just said. Like, if you're genuinely struggling for work, then the law is probably, maybe the law is going to be looking at that in a positive light. See, I'm almost becoming a lawyer speak there. I almost said a definitive statement. I walked away from it straight away. Whereas if you're using this as an opportunity to further and feather your own nest, the law is probably not going to see that in such a positive way, which is what, to me, is what the law should be, which is the attraction that, I hope is the reason a lot of lawyers become lawyers, is that kind of wanting to achieve that moral balance in the world.
Yeah, look, that is certainly from my perspective, and I don't have as much, by any stretch of the imagination, experience with, the matrimonial courts and the judges, but I have some, and they've always struck me as people who are looking for equity, and especially when children are involved, right? There's a level of, really, like, we have one completely innocent party, right, or a couple of completely innocent parties, and then I got the two of you, right? And so, especially when children are involved, I think the courts are more reactive to protecting the best interest of the children. And so, if you're trying to game the system, especially on child support, you're going to get hit, and it's going to hurt really bad. So, I wanted to share that fact. And, I certainly, Sarah, before we wrap everything, I want to give you the last word. But from my perspective, I just want to appreciate you being with us here and answering the kinds of questions. If anybody has a challenge or a question with anything that Sarah, myself, or Peter shared today, I do recommend you reaching out to Sarah and asking whatever questions. At minimum, she could guide you towards your process. I know that this can be sometimes embarrassing. I know that sometimes people have a lot of pride and don't want to feel ashamed of reaching out on these kinds of questions because of the implications and the emotional connection they have with these types of situations. But please don't sit there, and suffer with uncertainty and not know the answer to those questions. I would recommend reaching out to Sarah. And again, I just want to say how much I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing what you had to share. So I'm going to give you the last word, but I want to give Peter the almost final word before we wrap up here.
Thanks, Michael. The reason behind a bunch of my questions is I've worked with, 2 dozen, 3 dozen lawyers across the last 20 years in various different guises. Sometimes I've been very right, sometimes I've been very wrong. And I don't think you realize how special you guys are. And I really wanted that to shine across in this process, because what you just said is absolutely right. I'll hold my hands up. Myself and my wife are arguing with an intensity we've never done before. but we've been locked in the same space for 4 weeks. I would argue with anybody if you lock me in a room for 4. In fact, I'd probably be far worse. So a lot of the things that I think people are going through right now, it really isn't your fault.
No.
The scenario you've been presented with, nobody would have ever dreamed up in the worst nightmare of a film. Right? We are beyond Hollywood in how this is. So talk to people like Michael, like Sarah, and get advice. Right? There should be no pride there. It should just literally just, this is what's going on. Help. How can I? What can I? So please speak to them. Number one. Number two, and I'm going to do this quickly, www.hackmankind.com. If you've been watching this on Facebook, you could have been watching it on Zoom with our backstage people and asking questions, and at least seeing the hilarity of me trying to get Facebook Live working when Zoom isn't going according to plan. That alone is worth the admission. But all you do is go to the website, there's a blue box, put your email address in, and that's it, you're done, you're in. And my final, before I hand over, is doctors, nurses, EMTs, teachers, police officers and firefighters. Thank you for everything you're doing. If I think I've got it hard, my mission right now is stay at home and wash my hands. So for what you're doing for me, for my family, for my community, for our countries, for humanity, thank you very much. And with that, I will pass over to Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me. I just really want to quickly echo what Peter was just saying. And I also want to, thank all of our essential workers, our healthcare, workers, and, everybody who is really going out there and taking care of us as a community. Although I do feel the challenges here, I do recognize how truly, truly lucky we are. And, this has been a real pleasure. I really appreciate being invited to be a guest here. I am available. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me or the other practitioners in our family law department. We are here for you, and there is no judgment. There is no question that is too small or insignificant. This is a difficult time. We recognize that, and we're here to sort of coach you through whatever your next steps may be, give you your options, simply provide information, whatever it calls for. So thank you again.
Beautifully said, Sarah. Michael Smikun here for Hack Mankind, your relentless guardian, helping to shape and influence results. Thanks for watching, folks.